It's time for world politics. We're going to see what's happening on the political land front and all along those lines, or the political landscape, I should say, and everything in that space. We know a lot of people are talking about Dr. Jill Biden and the whole notion of her being a doctor, and also the fact that apparently the former president has a health issue. And some people are asking the question that if she's a doctor, why didn't she know about this in an earlier standpoint when he was the president and all along those lines? But she is a doctor with a doctorate in education. So her doctorate is in education, not in medicine. But I do know that some of the MAGA folks were wondering why she didn't know about this since she has that doctorate. But as we all know, there are various kinds of doctorates out there. And Trump backs off the ceasefire after a call with Putin, letting fighting rage on. So Trump doesn't know how to deal with gangsters, is what a article in the Kyiv Independent is saying. And the U.S. is letting Ukraine down once again. That's coming out of Ukraine itself. So some people are even saying, like those in the Atlantic, that Putin is still in charge. And Britain, France, and Canada have condemned Israel's expansion of the Gaza war and all along those lines. So that's just something going on in the political front. And EU countries have adopted 4 sets of new Russian sanctions. So EU and Britain are going ahead with new Russian sanctions without waiting for Trump. So they're going to have the sanctions without waiting to see if that's something he wants to do or doesn't want to do, and all along those lines. So that is definitely something that is on the political land front and world politics at that. And latest on Trump presidency as he pushed for the House GOP to pass his budget bill. So he visited the Capitol to urge House Republicans to pass what he's calling a big, beautiful bill. So we'll find out if folks think that it is one big, beautiful bill, because that is what he is saying. And Republican governors say they stand united in support of Trump's one big, beautiful bill. So that's something that folks are talking about as well. And we'll find out if folks agree that it's one big, beautiful bill. And a New Orleans jail employee is arrested and charged with helping 10 inmates escape. First arrest made in connection with the Orleans Parish jail inmate escape. So that might be something to do with politics, as oftentimes where the jail systems are controlled by political interests as well. And Trump has announced, and maybe Jonathan Lockwood will be glad about this, his Golden Dome missile defense system. So Trump to unveil plans for the Golden Dome missile defense shield that could cost a whole lot of money. Trump and Hedges unveiled a $175 billion plan for the Golden Dome missile shield. And I know we were talking about that recently, and Jonathan Lockwood is a big fan of that. So I'm going to bring in our folks and all along those lines. And by the way, former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has announced her Georgia governor bid slamming Trump in her campaign video. So ex-Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, I should say, enters the Georgia governor race in a test for the Dems. Will Keisha Lance Bottoms' ties to Joe Biden hurt her campaign for governor? So we'll find out if this is a good thing or a bad thing, and all along those lines. But like I said, we're going to bring in my fine folks. I know I got Nick with me, and I know I've got Rick Rosner with me. And like I said, it's a shame we don't have Dr. Lockwood with us, because he actually wants to do a series here on this network in that general space. So I'll bring in Nick and see if he got my email, because he wants to do a whole TV series about in defense of the Golden Dome and everything like that. And he said he would love to do a spinoff, since we know Sasha Starr has 2 shows, but he'd like to do a spinoff show. It will be how the Golden Dome can be created and what his thoughts are in all of that. But apparently it's going to happen, at least according to Pete Hedges and Trump, because they are creating this Golden Dome that I guess will cover the entire United States, kind of the way that the Iron Dome does over Israel. So we'll see if this is practical or not. I know there was a lot of arguments about that. We've got Rick waving his hands and everything like that. And
all right, so they're saying 25 billion. No, it's $500 billion. It might be 25 billion a year for the next 10, 15 years to try to develop it, but the overall cost is going to be $500 billion. And if you want a cheaper alternative, then engage in nuclear arms reduction talks with Russia. So we're spending 100 billion a year just servicing our nuclear missiles, keeping them in shape to be fired at the enemy. We have 1,700 of them ready to be deployed. They're battle ready. Russia, 10 billion a year on theirs. Russia's kind of broke from the war. So, I'm sure there are lots of dimensions to this that I'm not aware of, but it might be a time to start talking to them about each side reducing their nuclear weapons.
That would be a great idea.
So your solution is to engage,
Nick, what is your thoughts around this idea?
Russia, which they've been trying to do for 3 years and got nowhere with. Is that what your solution is?
Well, that's what he's saying and everything. But Nick, what is your thoughts about Dr. Jonathan Lockwood? Because we were talking about it after the show. You're having a show about the Iron Dome.
In La La Land, you engage with Putin, and he says, "Of course, I'll reduce my force." Notice how easy it is to deal with when it comes to Ukraine. Like not. Okay, so if you live in La La Land, which is LA, then of course you believe you're going to engage in Putin.
No, not. I mean, okay, there's a lot of reasons Putin wouldn't. Russia as a country sucks. Terrible economy, terrible life expectancy. So, the only thing they have are nukes. So, yeah, they probably don't want to give up any nukes.
Yeah. But, so the thing is, you're wasting your time. So you have to look at another alternative.
Okay, one more thing though. Talking about the Iron Dome versus the Golden Dome. Israel has an Iron Dome. For one thing, Israel, I don't know what it's 60 miles wide by 100 miles long or something. So they've got much less land area to protect. And if they miss a missile, that their interceptors, they knock down like 98% of the missiles, but those missiles are traveling at like 1,000 miles an hour. And if they miss one, it blows up part of an apartment. It does very little damage. Usually nobody's even killed if a missile gets through. If a nuclear weapon gets through, then it blows a hole in Chicago and kills 250,000 people. So,
yeah, but that's also assuming it's able to hit Chicago. We've already done the math. That given what you said, that it costs to maintain the nuclear weapons, which were like 91 billion a year, and given that Russia's defense budget is 66 billion, obviously they aren't even maintaining theirs.
No, they are. They've got lower costs of labor and whatever. They maintain theirs. Who knows if they're doing a good job or not? But they're only spending 10 billion a year on making.
We don't have Sasha. 1 second. We don't have Sasha with us.
500 billion over 10 years.
We do have another Canadian joining us and everything. But I did want to get to another MAGA person and see what John's going to say, because I know he's not a big fan. But apparently, Kristi Noem was in some Senate hearings today, and she misstated the idea, and this comes to you, Nick, of habeas corpus under her Senate scrutiny, because she defined habeas corpus as the president's right to deport people. So Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem struggled to defend habeas corpus at the Senate hearing, and she incorrectly defined what it means, because I guess she was just thinking that it meant that the president could deport whoever he wanted to and everything like that, but that is not what it is. But you're a lawyer, so what is habeas corpus for those people that are listening that don't know what it is, and all along those lines? But it apparently it isn't what Kristi thought it was.
Oh, I'm not going to comment on that, obviously, because I'm not here to give legal advice to anybody that's listening. But I do want to talk about this Golden Dome and this expenses that we're talking about, 25 billion or 500 billion over 10 years. And we do know that the U.S. defense budget is $1 trillion a year. Okay. Why wouldn't it be a bad idea to, rather than have all these funds squandered over useless stuff that the Defense Department buys, you do something useful for a change and defend the people in the United States of America? I don't know why La La Land people are against it, except they're against anything that Trump
No, but okay, so I'm
No, that's a good reason.
skeptical because the physics is really hard. It was hard in the
Hard
80s.
to get a man to the moon. Talk to JFK about that, Rick. You know,
So
like
we
we
tried
do it not because it's difficult. We do it because we can. So the physics hard.
No, we talked about the challenges with physics that are re-entering. Intercontinental ballistic missile is traveling kind of straight down at 25,000 miles an hour. You shoot it, it shoots 2,800 miles above the Earth. And while it's doing that, the Earth is rotating underneath, and then it comes down at 25,000 miles an hour. And just before it hits, it splits into 6 or 10 different warheads that all fly off in their same direction, in different directions. It's a huge physics problem. It's
it's going to be a problem. They broke Enigma because it was a problem. So what? That's the reason we have really good mathematicians here. And we have really a lot of smart people here.
We got John here who knows more about it than probably anybody else here.
John, what is your take on all of this going on? The only thing I was going to add
He's
just
muted.
is another MAGA issue. And you are muted, John, and everything. But the Supreme Court ruling on Venezuela is apparently rippling through a part of Miami.
Let's finish up the Golden Dome.
Let's finish up the Golden Dome. What is your take on the Golden Dome, John?
It just reminds me of Star Wars. Ronald Reagan. Not a good idea. Instead of escalating, should be de-escalating. Less nukes, less provocation, because that's what it is, in my opinion.
Hey, John, along those same lines, I want to get to another issue that's very much controversial, and I know it's one of Nick's favorite places because he's always talking about how bad Venezuela is, but the Supreme Court ruling on Venezuelans has rippled through Miami's Venezuela, which apparently is a lot of Venezuelans living in Miami, and I've only visited Miami, actually I did live in Boca Raton a long time ago, back in the late 80s, but that was a brief stint and everything, but Trump has canceled deportation protections, and that's definitely an issue for folks that are in the past have had protected status. So the Supreme Court is allowing Trump to end protected status for a group of Venezuelan nationals, and is letting Trump move toward ending temporary deportation protection for Venezuelans. And I know that you say Venezuela is a failed state, Nick. So what is your take on this idea of Venezuela losing this protected status?
Well, it's a problem with Joe Biden. He gave people blanket protections, and of course, all that does is encourage more people to illegally immigrate to the United States. And some legally came in, which a lot of the Venezuelans here did come legally. But the reason it's a failed state, it's one of these typical liberal countries that believed that they could, because they fall in this Marxism craziness, that they could take over the oil fields and run them. And then when the people took over the oil fields, they figured something out very important. They couldn't run them. They had no expertise in it whatsoever. And so now they have the largest oil reserves in the world, but you have a bunch of flakes that can't figure out how to operate it. And so they're all broke. Cry me a river.
John, what is your take on Venezuela? Have you been paid any attention to South America and some of the things going on in South America? I know that Mexico and other countries have stood up against Trump and everything, but what's your take on what's going on with Latin America?
I don't really know a lot about it, so not really. Just the whole idea of going after a community is probably not a good idea. Venezuelan immigrants have a very low crime rates, high educational attainment compared to other migrant groups.
And this ruling puts 1/3 350,000 refugees from Venezuela at risk of deportation. And Trump's ICE has shown not even a great ability to round up high numbers of people. His numbers are actually trailing Biden and way behind Obama's numbers for deportation. Obama was the king of deportation. He moved out, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000 immigrants a month for some of his presidency.
Well, it also begs this question, Rick. What were they doing here to begin with? Okay, if you're in Venezuela, your natural migration pattern isn't to the United States of America. It's to Colombia, Argentina. You could go to Chile. You could go to Ecuador. You could go to Peru. You could go to Central America. Why did they come here? The 350,000 people. They don't even speak our language. So, this is, again, the failure of the American immigration system. You open up the doors.
If there are any issues with the immigrants from Venezuela, charge them.
The way I understand the issues, John, is the thing is they come here and they basically use a lot of American resources here. In other words,
if you actually look it up, it turns out that
education services. So the real problem is they're expensive to have in the United States.
Yeah, but if you actually Google it, you find out that Venezuelans participate in the labor force at a higher rate than other foreign-born populations and native-born Americans. They're here to work, which means
Nick, what you just said is not true. What Nick just said is not true. There's no evidence provided, sources that Venezuelans disproportionately use public resources compared to other immigrant groups. In fact, they have relatively high education attainment and, like I said, low crime rates, and they are often eager to integrate and work. The primary strain on resources comes during the initial period after arrival, just like all other immigrants, before work authorization is processed. But this is a temporary phase that policy changes, such as expedited work permits, are designed to address.
Okay,
so what
really
you
good.
said, Nick,
that's great, John. I'm glad they're really hard workers. Then they could go to
but
Peru,
you made a claim
Chile,
that is
and Argentina, which they need very hard workers, and work there.
You made a claim.
Or they go to Canada. I don't care.
You made a claim.
What are they doing here?
Nick, you made a claim that Venezuelans use
that was a claim that
which is
Washington
not true.
made.
So I'll push back come Sunday, every day of the week. When I hear claims that are dubious, I'll push back every single time.
Well, you actually agreed with me, so I don't really care. You said that when they come here, it was a burden on the system over time.
No, I didn't agree with you. You said that they use more public resources rather compared to other groups. Not true.
Yeah, and in general, what happens? Immigrants are net contributors to the economy. Yeah, when they first get here, they use services for the first year. Then they turn it around. They get jobs. They start paying taxes, and after they've been here,
that's fine. That's fine. And they can go to Canada. They can go to because Canadians seem to like them. They can go to they can actually go to Colombia. It's right next door. They can go to Argentina. Argentina needs smart, hardworking people. They can go to Chile. They need smart, hardworking people. So my question is, why are they coming here?
Well, for opportunity and because
opportunity.
And
so let's hold a second. If I'm hearing you correctly, because I just met one a couple of days ago and everything, a young lady. You would not have people come from Argentina and other places to go even to school, or you would send them after they got their education back to their respective countries? Because I've told you before that I've got neighbors that are from China and other places that are here attending Duke University, and I think some of them might be attending UNC. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you would not have foreigners come here?
No, I didn't say we would not have foreigners come here. You just don't need 350,000 of them, Mark. I mean, the countries have quotas, including Spain, where I live. They just don't say, okay, let's bring in 10 million Chinese. As a matter of fact, they don't want 10 million Chinese here, only because they want Spain to be more Spanish, all right? 350,000, you're talking like moving a mini city over to the United States of America What do you need 350,000 Venezuelans for? Oh, because I know it's because somebody, maybe them, allowed their country to be taken over by the liberal left. And then they decide that we're going to take over the oil fields. And
But
then they figured out they don't know how to run an oil field, and they sent their country down the toilet. And so we're supposed to bail them out.
Nick, you also made another statement.
Make it equitable. Send some to Canada. Canada wants them.
But some go to Canada. Some do go to Canada and everything.
Well, how many? 350,000? Come on.
I don't know the numbers. Maybe God knows the numbers, but I do know that some go to Canada, some go to the adjacent countries that you're talking about. But you made another statement earlier, and all along those lines, and I always laugh when people make this statement and everything, because you said that they many of them speak Spanish or they speak another language and everything like that. Last time I checked, and John and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, is there a language called American? I believe it's called English, and it's actually the old English that came from England, and there are a number of other languages as well. I don't think there's a language called American.
Right, there's not. Okay, so the vast majority of Venezuelan immigrants are in Florida. Nick, you used to live in Florida. Did you find that you were overrun by Venezuelans? Did you just
no, you're overrun completely by Latin Americans. They weren't
so Venezuelans contribute nearly $500 million in local and Florida state taxes. So you get rid of the Venezuelans, you lose $500 million in Florida.
Hey, Rick, it's worse than that, because there's a show that we do here on the network. It's called Que Pasa Mujer. And one of the things that they oftentimes talk about is the economic power of the Spanish community. It's a show that Vivian Adriana does along with her business partners, Madeline Garcia and Nixie, who I believe is her cousin, Nixie Galvez and everything. But Nick, the Spanish community or the Latin American community brings in $3.7 trillion. That's trillion with a T to the American economy. So that's what they bring into the economy here.
What's the population of Florida?
Florida has about 20 million people.
And you're complaining about 350,000 Venezuelans. What's the percentage of that?
It's like 1.5%.
Yeah, but see, South Florida, if you ever happen to go down there, it's not Venezuelans, people from Colombia, Brazil. It's a Latin American city. Miami.
So Florida has a ton of old people, right? People in their 80s, people in their 90s. Who takes care of those people? It's largely Latino immigrants are caring for the olds. So, if your Nana is
so that's the reason.
The characterization of overrun by Venezuelans in Florida, within Florida.
No, they come from all places of Latin America.
It's laughable.
But if we're talking about Venezuela and the failed liberal left, which is one reason why they left Venezuela. Venezuela had the most.
You like to throw laugh.
Most people exit than any other country. 6.7 million. I thought that was in the U.S.
So 22
Actually,
million.
We go to Colombia. 1.7 million. Colombia,
Venezuelans.
Peru, Chile, and then the United States.
All right. So here's another thing. So Florida has a lot of thong bathing suits. South Beach, Miami. The suits that don't have a butt. They just have a string that goes up the butt. Who looks better in those suits? Some white lady who's 50 pounds overweight, or some Brazilian lady with cocoa-colored skin who has Brazil has the finest butts in the world. They even have a best butt beauty contest every year in Brazil. So whose butts do you want to see walking on South Beach? Colombians, Brazilians, Venezuelans, or frickin' beer and French fried fed white lady butts?
Is this a question or a statement, Rick?
No, it's a statement.
Very good. Ask and answer.
Support all the Latin Americans. The quality of butts in Miami and along all the beaches is going to go to hell.
Okay. By the way, I'm just going to get some population information just for those that are watching. But apparently, I think we said how many people are coming over from Venezuela?
Well, according to this is, I think, Statistica, 505,647. Of them,
505,000 out of
350,
a population that
350
is
were given blanket
approximately, hold on a second,
immunity, and
out
the
of a
blanket
population that is
immunity got
approximately,
pulled, and that's what
hold
you
on,
guys are crying about.
hold on a second, but
There's
it's
no
a
blanket
population that's
immunity.
approximately 28 million people with a diverse ethnic composition. About 51.6 are multiracial, meaning that they're mixed European and indigenous. 43.6% are white, 3.6% are Afro-Venezuelan, and 1.2% belong to other ethnic groups. So out of a population of 28 million, we're not even getting a sizable portion of that coming here and everything, because this
And
is
everybody knows that mixed race people are better looking than like white people who've been breeding with themselves for 20 generations. And they look better in bathing suits.
I appreciate that. Since I'm Hispanic, you would not guess it, but
Right. And you're a handsome guy. It's your
part of the reason why I'm in Spain is my 23rd great grandfather was King Ferdinand III of Castile and Leon. And the other one was Ramon Berger, who was actually the Count of Barcelona. So this is why I get to see my great grandfather's graves. But but it still doesn't solve the Venezuelan question.
No, the
What
best
are they
looking
doing
people,
here?
the best, and people look good because they're genetically superior. The best looking people have cappuccino colored skin and blue or gray eyes. You don't get that from white people banging each other. You get it from whitey getting with somebody from Brazil. You get mixed race people. Look on TV. The best looking people on Grey's Anatomy or are mixed race.
Well, they got a large population of mixed race. I just said that that's the majority of the population in Venezuela, and their birth rate is apparently 15.6% per births per 1,000 population. That it was as of 2022 and everything. I didn't want
So
you
they're
to
making more babies. Like the U.S. has a baby shortage. We're only making 80% as many babies as we need to replace the population. So bring Venezuelans in. They're super hot. They look good in a thong bikini. We'll be making a ton of American babies thanks to Venezuela.
That could be the issue. That could solve what. I have another political thing, and I'd love to hear from both John and Nick on this, and you as well, Rick. But apparently, because it came up sometimes back, that SNAP, which is what goes into helping with some of the school lunches and other programs like that, Nebraska is going to be the first state to ban soda and energy drinks from SNAP under their first USDA waiver. So they were wanting waivers and everything because they were complaining about this whole notion of what sodas and energy drinks do to us. So a state in the plains, I think Nebraska is considered a plain state, is going to be the first in the nation to ban soda and energy drinks from public grocery aid benefits. So
I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with some states want to remove all joy from SNAP. Like they make long lists. You can't have Cheetos, you can't have, Hostess cupcakes. That's kind of bullshit. But like soda is pretty corrosive. So if they just want to do soda, I'm okay with that. I don't like the punitive lists that say if you have SNAP, you can only, have, sliced turkey and vegetables and anything else.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Hey, I know one of the things we talk about, Rick, is the nepotism of this current administration and some of the people that have been picked for jobs, and some of them maybe aren't qualified for their jobs. I mentioned Christy Gnomes, who doesn't know what habeas corpus is, and apparently Charles Kushner, the father of Trump's son-in-law, has been confirmed as the ambassador to France. So I guess he's going to
this is crazy time because Charles Kushner is a felon. He went to prison for a despicable crime. He was engaging in real estate fraud, and he was afraid that his brother was going to turn on him, turn state's witness. So what Kushner did was he hired a prostitute to have sex with his own brother and get it on video so that he could blackmail his brother into not giving him up. And the judge in the case says this is one of the most despicable cases I have ever seen. But since he's Trump's brother-in-law, basically, his daughter is married to Kushner's kid, Trump pardoned him for this despicable set of crimes. And now he's making him ambassador to what, France? The cushiest ambassadorship in the world, where you get to hang out in Paris and eat delicious ass French food all the time and live in a mansion. It's pretty garbage.
Any thoughts on that, Jim?
Also, Trump has appointed
Rick is bang on.
Oh, sorry.
Rick is bang on. What he just said is all true.
Trump has appointed 23 people who used to work for Fox News to his cabinet.
Yeah. Make America great again, right, Nick?
Yeah, it's called "To the Victor Belongs the Spoils." I mean, there was a great book written, I don't know, about a half a century ago called "The Prince" by Machiavelli. So all he's doing is following things that have been done for.
Oh, wonderful! It's all great.
Well, he's also got a pick to lead the IRS. I know it's one of your favorite groups, Nick. Billy Long was promoted for, and apparently was a backer of some non-existent tax credits. So apparently that's going to be Trump's pick to lead the IRS and everything like that. So they are saying the IRS is in turmoil. And I know last month, which was April, people were rushing to make sure that they're
less IRS inspectors. That's good too, right?
Yeah, actually, that pretty is.
Wonderful,
because they're abusive.
Yeah.
So
why get billionaires to pay? If anybody who's rich, less audits. Nothing but good.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Right?
If you ever gone through an audit, I wouldn't see that to be a bad idea. Actually.
Yeah, actually, very good.
Remember, the whole system is based on this voluntary compliance.
Well, speaking of voluntary, Nick,
I'm being sarcastic.
I know you're being sarcastic. Speaking of voluntary and not being sarcastic, apparently, because this was a plan that was in the work from Trump, but the U.S. sent 68 migrants back to Honduras and Colombia in what they're calling the first voluntary deportation, because they did give them that right to self-deport, and they took it from the U.S., landed in Honduras with U.S. citizen children, meaning they were actually born here in the U.S. They were aboard this flight and everything, but they have gone back.
Can we go back to the IRS for a second? So the IRS estimates that the money lost per year in legitimate tax revenue due to tax avoidance, because they don't have the personnel to go after rich people who are just not paying because they're not going to get caught, is more than 2/3 of $1 trillion a year. 600 IRS estimates the annual tax gap, the difference between taxes owed and taxes paid, $696 billion. You're worried about like our $34 trillion budget, national debt. Here is a way to take care of what, 2% of the national debt per year by recovering more in tax revenue that we're just not doing because we've left the IRS understaffed.
Yeah, but what you didn't show is the huge amount of loss on GDP as these government officials go in and they beat up small businesses on a daily basis, dragging them through the mud. Rick, you don't put that into your equation.
Well, you should be super happy because there's a ton less of this
agony and the pain, because they tend not to target the wealthy people. They target target small businesses, because they're too afraid to go after wealthy people. So.
Well, rich people have good accountants, they have lawyers. It's tougher to go after them. So that's why
so you're advocating. What Nick just said, you're advocating the typical left position. Go after the middle class.
Again, what Nick just said is not true. There's no credible evidence that the IRS is dragging people through the mud via audits.
But audits, if you wanted to be afraid of audits, live in the 60s or the 70s when the IRS was adequately staffed. They've been inadequately staffed for 30 years. It's worse now. Biden was trying to add 87,000 IRS workers who would have gone after rich tax avoiders and who would have been available to help everyday taxpayers figure out their shit. but that's gone now. Those employees are not happening. And so, yeah, the people who suffer from a broken IRS are poor people and middle class people, because computers can, when you screw up your taxes as a middle class person, you get a computer generated letter. It's easy for computers to catch discrepancies on middle class tax returns. It's harder for a computer to catch rich tax avoiders. That's why you need the additional agents, which we don't have. So goodbye to hundreds of billions of dollars in legit tax revenue that's not being collected from rich people every year.
Well, speaking of rich folks and everything like that, and I know Nick's going to love this one because apparently we pulled out of it and everything. For the first time, the U.S. is absent from the WHO's, which is the World Health Organization, annual assembly. But in a historic move, the WHO member states approved a 20% funding increase and their 2026-2027 budget. So they're looking ahead to life without the U.S. And the WHO chief is defending his $2.1 billion budget request by comparing it with the cost of war, because we know that a lot of times these health crises are like a war and everything like that. So it looks like a lot of these member nations, minus the U.S., because the U.S. pulled out of WHO, are going to be trying to find a way to combat whatever the next pandemic is. Any thoughts on that?
We're out of WHO, though. America has nothing to do with WHO.
Sorry, I was looking at tax numbers. So we're talking about. I mean, so yeah, we're always in danger. Like, all right, so Trump disbanded, or he scattered in 2018. He scattered the NHS national, or the Center for Disease Control had a fast response team that was tasked with finding emerging pandemics and addressing them. Now, in 2018, Trump took those people and broke up the team and scattered them to various other government agencies. So we didn't have a team in place when COVID started emerging in Wuhan in 2019. We didn't have the personnel. Would things have gone different if we still had the fast response team in place? I don't freaking know. But can other pandemics emerge? Yeah, bird flu has been itching to mutate, and it's already killed 15% of California's cows. It moved from birds to cows, killed a ton of our cows, and if it moves to people, which it has, but not very effectively, it's pretty fatal if it gets to a person. But it's hard to infect a person with bird flu. But if it mutates, then you've got the next pandemic. And you need people in place who aren't being run by RFK Jr., who doesn't even believe in germs, who swims in shit water, who famously last week took his family to swim in a crystal clear creek where they were told not to swim because the water may look clear, but it's full of germs from a sewage plant. And RFK doesn't care. Let's go frolic in the shit water.
Not just any germs, but didn't it also, if I remember correctly, didn't it have Ebola in it and everything, which is a very...
I don't know. Like Ebola is scary. If you get Ebola, 80-90% of the time it'll kill you, but you can't breathe it in and get it. You have to get bled on. You have to inhale blood from an infected person. So it's as up to now, Ebola is controllable because you don't get it from the air like you get COVID or flu.
And I don't think it was Ebola. I think it was E. coli, which is oftentimes in contaminated swimming pools, is what I was told it had.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, E. coli is different. Yeah, you can get that from Jack in the Box, from Chipotle. Every once in a while, there's a big outbreak at a chain restaurant, but and it's pretty killy too. I don't know. It probably kills 20% of the people who get a bad infection from it.
Hey, Nick, I've got another one going for you and everything, but apparently they are saying that Cherry Redstone, so this is one of our competitors, I guess, to some degree, but the senators are probing Paramount for possibly violating bribery laws with their Trump settlement. So apparently they had a settlement because of some of the things that were going on. And apparently he's thinking about suing, I think, ABC because of their coverage of Qatar and everything in the Qatar plain, but senators are questioning Paramount over efforts to settle the Trump lawsuit. So maybe they settled, but they might not have settled fairly and everything, because they're even
Well,
saying
let me set Nick up for
Trump
this.
owns the guillotine over Redstone's neck and everything like that. So what is our...
So Nick, anybody can sue anybody for anything, right? All you have to do is file the papers with a court, right? And the judge might throw it out, judge might fine you, but you're not, nobody is limited. Anybody can file papers.
Yeah, for the most part, yes.
And so what happens is Trump has been involved in nearly 5,000 lawsuits in his life. He loves suing people.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been happening with Trump is he's been filing these laughable lawsuits that should be thrown out by the judge, or if it goes to a jury, it gets thrown out, before it gets to jury, summary judgment for being absurd. Or if it goes to a jury, the jury's like, this is fucking ridiculous. But a lot of these absurd lawsuits, people have been settling because they don't want to get on the bad side of the president.
And they don't want to get caught up in the political system of the courts either and everything. Speaking of that, and I got one for you, Rick. It's one of your favorite topics, and apparently this one came from Melania Trump, but he did sign it. But a Texas teen was the victim of a fake AI nudes. So now Trump has signed this thing called the Take It Down Act, criminalizing deep fake and revenge porn. So I was wondering, have you ever been a victim of that, Rick, or maybe John's been a victim of it? And what is our thoughts around this notion that the great deep fakes that are out there?
No, I would be happy and proud to be the victim, to have fake nudes of me going around. It would reduce it would make less work for me trying to get my real nudes out there. So yeah, anybody who wants to put my head on somebody, that's fine.
So you're not going to try to use this new law? And John, are you going to try to have somebody take a deep fake of you, or does anybody try to take a deep fake of you? Because like I said, I know Nick found you on LinkedIn and some of the
I don't know where John went, but
okay.
But the laws like this are tricky. We need them to protect people. But AI is so productive that AI is generating hundreds and perhaps thousands of pornographic images a minute, 24/7 around the world. And is anybody in charge of these looking at them as AI just spits them out? I kind of doubt it, because I see the work product and it just looks like endless, like insanity, like these, like.
And by the way, I'm just going. John did leave, but he left some notes to us and everything. But first, Jacoby said, removing us from the WHO will lead to more deaths due to less research, information, and preparedness. And he's in the background. I think he might be going to one of the games because he's been covering a lot of baseball and different other sports. But John said he got to go, but he said he'll continue to fact check everything MAGA people say. So I guess he's fact checking anything that MAGA folks say and all along those lines. So he's for now, but he said he's going to be the fact checker of MAGA.
How could you? As we well know, the MAGA is the bastion of truth and light in this world, Mark. Why would you want to...
Truth and light? I just told you, Christy Domes doesn't even know what happiest corpus is.
Right.
Well, we've been talking about, we should say what it is, that the government has to be accountable for the people accused of crimes. You can't, if somebody gets accused of a crime or maybe no crime at all, they can't just disappear into some kind of legal fog where you don't know where they are. The government has to be able to produce you.
Like dictator countries have done, because in dictator countries they oftentimes just disappear and nobody knows where they went. So we cannot do the whole dictator.
Yeah, that's against habeas corpus. We don't have forever dungeons where you can just disappear people. Like South American or dictatorships where they take you up in a helicopter and then they just push you out over the jungle. You're done. And nobody knows where you went. your loved ones
Well,
can't recover.
speaking of being done, and this was for you, Nick, because maybe you can be the voice of Magus, and sometimes you like to play that role on TV. But the Qatar's prime minister says the luxury jet gift wasn't bribery for Trump. So, and I know that he's going to have to refit the plane to make it Air Force One capable and everything like that. So, standing by in San Antonio,
He has a point.
From
I read an
Qatar
article.
is intended to replace Air Force One, but apparently they're dismissing concerns over the offer. So they're like, "No, we weren't trying to bribe him. We just wanted him to have a nice plane."
Well, no, here's the problem. So the Qatar took a very heavy plane, one of these double deckers, 747s, and they added a ton of stuff to it, but it can't land any place. It's too heavy. Like, this plane is so heavy that there are only a few runways in the world that are long enough and sturdy enough to take the plane. So it's like a white elephant. What are we built this thing, this flying palace? What are we going to do with it? Because nobody wants the frickin' thing because you can't use it. So we need to find a sucker to take our plane. And in Trump, they found a sucker.
They found a sucker to take the plane, and we'll see what goes on in that case. Hey, Nick, what is your take on the big, beautiful bill? I mentioned that at the beginning of the news, but apparently that's what Trump is calling this House bill. And apparently maybe he's going to have some budget controls or some other things that will be wonderful and everything. But he's asking them to pass his one big, beautiful bill and everything like that. I did hear there were cuts in Medicaid and other things that might not be all that beautiful for the elderly and others. But what's your notion? Because he's going to visit, I think he may already be doing the visit to talk to the Capitol and the House Republicans to see if he can't get this quote unquote one big, beautiful bill passed and everything.
Well, Mr. Wonderful is against it. He's against it for this reason. There's a 9-year statute of limitations to audit the employee retention credit. And he thinks it's way too long, and I would tend to agree with him. And unfortunately, there's no line item veto to get rid of things like that are built into the bill. So once again, you just have a dysfunctional budget. What can I say? Yeah, right.
I have numbers for you about the Qatar jet. So I looked it up. There are 9,000 airports in the world that serve commercial airlines. Only 200 of them can this big ass flying palace land at. I don't know how that compares with other planes, but
it's the same as the A380. The A380 is too big and can't land at a lot of airports because of
Speaking of which, because you brought it up yesterday and you brought it up a couple of times, I've asked friends of mine and none of them can afford it. But how is your efforts going for us to get a Pod TV airplane? Because I know you really want an airplane just like Trump has.
Yeah.
So how is that go to get a Pod TV airplane?
I personally, I like commercial jets, more so than I do private jets because they're too small, too cramped. So I'm not that interested in getting on them. If you saw them, they're just tiny things. I like big jets.
Nick is right about the A380, another huge ass plane. There's only 16 airports in the U.S. where you can land the A380.
Yeah. How many worldwide, Rick?
140 worldwide. If you include diversion airports where something goes wrong and they have to put down, that rises to 400 airports, but that's not for regular service.
Yeah, the A380, that was one of the problems, is they had to build, a lot of airports had to build longer runways to service them so they don't service all the cities that are out there.
Yeah,
the same thing, I guess, with the 747-8. Just some planes are too big. So, for example, when you fly into Reagan, I always fly on a CRJ 900 because they don't take big jets there. I mean,
a lot of places, I don't know that they take super big jets that are RDU and everything. Hey, Rick, I got a question for you that came from a friend of mine in the social media world. They were bragging on San Francisco, bragging on the health and not the health, but the art, the weather, the transportation, and a number of other things. But this new friend of mine who is of Asian background and everything said, and I'll quote, "But the San Francisco I loved has disappeared. The public security here is getting worse and worse. It is also smelly. The first thing that merchants in San Francisco do when they open their doors every day is to wash the streets because at night homeless people will urinate and defecate on the streets. Not washing the streets will really affect business. So apparently, y'all have a problem in San Francisco and in other parts of California, because I know you brought it up with the homeless population. So I just wanted your take, because that's what this young lady wrote me. And
all right, so I looked it up while you were talking. San Francisco has an estimated 8,300 homeless people. And yeah, they need to poop someplace. And often it's the sidewalk. So San Francisco is known, especially on Fox News, as the city with human poop on the street. I would guess that it's not that as big a problem as Fox News says it is, because it's A, Fox News, and because B, we have 70,000 homeless people in LA County. And I don't see human poop all over the place, even though we might have 8 times as many homeless. But yeah, my wife and I were in San Francisco a couple of years ago, and there were like street vendors who were just on the sidewalk selling stuff they'd stolen from CVS, that they go in, they just grab stuff off the shelves, and they come out to the street and sell it. So yeah, that's a problem. Everything's locked up in the drugstores now, and the other, the Walmarts, the Targets, because there's a ton of theft. And like a bunch of like every other state in the U.S., there are dollar limits under which it's not a felony to steal. I think LA or the California's dollar limit is $900, which is similar to the rest of the country, which means people can, often steal with impunity. And yeah, it's a problem. Does it make San Francisco a hellscape? No. Frickin' San Francisco is still one of the great cities of America, even if you may have to, occasionally jump over a dookie.
Got to maybe jump over that every once in a while. I know we're going to wrap up, because I know you got your lawyer program going to come up shortly. We got some other programs, but we still got a few more minutes and everything. I'm going to switch to sports just really quickly, because they're now down to the Final Four. I don't think any of them are in California, because Golden State lost, and the Lakers and the Clippers are not there. But we've got the Oklahoma Thunder playing against the Minnesota Timberwolves and everything. Then we've got the Pacers playing against the Knicks. So the Knicks may actually win a championship, and they've not done that in ages. I know that one of our past hosts that still does some stuff on his own network, that being Zach, is a big fan of the Knicks, and he may be glad if they can win a championship and all along those lines. And then, of course, we've got the Carolina team getting ready to play the Florida team. So it's going to be me and you, Nick. We're going up against each other and everything like that. So are you rooting for the Panthers, or are you going to be rooting for the Hurricanes? Because that's who's in the one of the conference championships. I got to remember who's on the other side. I can't remember who's on that side, but they're down to their Final Four as well, I believe. But definitely Carolina's going up against Florida, and I know you've got interest in both.
Wait. What month is it right now, Mark?
It is May.
Okay. Is it hot outside where you live?
It is nice and warm. It was like close to 90 degrees.
Okay. And you're talking about, I think, hockey. Is that correct?
The hockey championships are going on now.
In May. Okay. And I grew up in Florida, where when I grew up, there was no hockey.
Well, y'all have a hockey team now. Y'all's hockey team actually, I think, won a Stanley Cup, or at least came close to winning a Stanley Cup. And I think they actually won it, and they are who Carolina Hurricanes are playing. And Carolina used not to have a hockey team, because that was the former Hartford team in Connecticut. So I
think what we need to do is bring John back on and deport all our hockey teams back to Canada, where they belong.
We're going to send them back to Canada?
Yeah, they need to deport all the hockey teams back to Canada, where they belong. They belong in the United States of America.
But by that same note, since you're Mr. Politics and everything, by that same note, because we do also have professional cricket teams, including one in, I believe, North Carolina now. So are we going to deport all the cricket teams back to India?
Yeah, what does North Carolina do with a hockey team when, what does it snow one day a year? Maybe. Yeah, but we've also got a cricket team. We've also got a cricket team. Tampa and Miami dealing with a hockey team. You're talking Florida. They don't see snow once every century. Come
Well,
on.
believe it or
You
not,
know,
one of Rick's favorite places,
this
they've got a hockey
crazy
team. Las
thing's
Vegas
got to
has a hockey
stop. They
team.
got
They
some
won a
send those
championship.
hockey teams back to Canada.
LA, the last time it snowed in LA, I think was 1948. And we've got a pretty good hockey team, though they keep getting taken out by the Oilers every year in the playoffs.
Yeah, I do have a. Hey, that raises a good question. This will be the last thing I ask. I was reading somebody who said that we are facing a crisis climate-wise. I know we've had some climate experts on, but they said that it's getting worse and worse, and that we may see the glaciers starting to melt and other things. Now, given it might be centuries down the line and everything, but how concerned are you, Nick, for your grandkids? Because I know you have grandkids, if I remember correctly, and you for your kids. Because I don't think you have any grandkids yet, Rick, that I'm aware of.
Well, let's talk about our grandkids because whenever we talk about the future, we talk about our grandkids. We don't talk about our great great grandkids because our great great grandkids we wouldn't like them if we met them because the kids of the year 2180. They're going to be half robots. They're going to look like the Borg on Star Trek. They're going to have they're going to have weird like computer glasses piping information directly into their brain. They're going to be, genetically tweaked. They're going to be like half the time they're going to be out of it because they're piping, they're working in virtual reality. So I don't know. Do I give a crap about our grandkids? Our great grandkids, because they're just going to be weird assholes of the future. The founding fathers, would they like us? No, they'd be like, oh my God, you guys are jerks.
Yeah, that would be interesting
man.
what Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson would say about us in this day and time. They'd probably be
They just had Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman on SNL a couple days ago. Bill and Ted went and got them from the past, and they had to send them back to the past to preserve the timeline. And Tubman and Douglas were like, hell no, we're not getting in your time machine again. We like it here. It's nice here. Don't send us back to 1870 where everything sucks.
Not only that, but I did a piece in there, I'm going to end the show, on when I was in high school on what MLK would have thought about the issues of the time, and I wrote that when I was in high school, and the same thing that I wrote then would still be relevant today, whether it was MLK or Martin Luther King. So a lot of things that they fought for, which was an end on poverty and better housing, food insecurities, there's stuff that we're still dealing with some 50 odd years
Here's
after their
one
death.
thing that would have happened with MLK. Now, MLK got harassed by the FBI a lot, right? J. Edgar Hoover did not like him. MLK liked to fool around. He liked to have, extramarital affairs. But now, if MLK were alive today, he would have an assistant who said, I'm sorry, sir, but we have to talk about this as an issue. It's not like it was in the 60s where you can keep this stuff covered up. And also, there's so much porn now, sir, Martin, that look, you got to cut out the screwing around and just, after the wife goes to bed, just sit down. This is a computer and it can do lots of stuff, include pulling up so many images of naked ladies. So just, can you satisfy yourself, with this instead of and MLK being a reasonable guy would say, yeah, I'll give it a try. And that would give him much more time and energy to devote to solving societal issues.
It's interesting you said that, because definitely that is the case. And last thing I'll say on that note is that the founder of the Carolina Times, which is our newspaper in terms of Black newspapers in this area in Durham, North Carolina, and it's no longer around, but they were doing some research on some of the crimes of the Integration Day, including the killing of Booker T. Spicely. And the reason that they found them was not because the paper was there, because a lot of those papers weren't microfiche, but because those people were considered like enemies of the state and all along those lines. So they actually had files on the FBI. So the FBI actually had copies of the newspaper. So when people have been doing these research and art exhibits, they actually found the papers that they needed in the FBI files. So freedom of information.
So that leads to, I can recommend a new TV show that's about the FBI, set in 1972. It's on, I believe, Max, right? HBO Max. And it stars Josh Holloway from Lost, and it's a good show. It's a ridiculous show, but he plays a guy who drives it's called Duster because he drives a Duster, which is a muscle car of the 70s, and he goes up against this lady FBI agent who faces all sorts of prejudice within the FBI. It presents most of the FBI guys are assholes, and she has to fight her own agency while also going after Josh Holloway. There's only one episode out so far, but it's pretty fun.
Cool. Well, we're going to end on that note, and then we have the lawyer show going on right about now, and we'll be back with World Edition on Wednesday. So we've got some more.
All right. So one more thing. My wife doesn't like many TV shows, but she watched Duster, and she's like, holy crap. Like, Josh Holloway is going to be the biggest thing in the world again. He was huge on Lost, and he's back. So
that sounds good. So hopefully people check out Duster, and we'll get ready to get out of here and check out the lawyer program.
all right, see you tomorrow morning.
See you tomorrow morning.